Hi, I'm AD Roberts from In War and Peace, and this is a new inspirational diorama set in a place and time in history. The year 1943 began badly for the German army on the Eastern Front. After a great struggle in Stalingrad, German Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus surrendered himself and the Sixth Army on January the 31st. Powerful sledgehammer blows from the strengthening of the Red Army began to shudder the entire southern flank of the German army. In the Caucasus, the Soviet steamroller started clearing the Taman Peninsula to eliminate the German threat to the Caspian Sea oil fields. The key to securing the entire northeastern shore of the Black Sea was Novorossiysk, an important deep seaport city held by the Germans since September 1942. The goal of the Soviet Operation C was to cut off and destroy the German and Romanian forces operating in and near Novorossiysk. The German 17th Army defending this area was composed of both German and Romanian divisions. The Soviet 47th Army from the North Caucasus front under General I.E. Petrov was to launch an overland assault from the northeast of the city. Once the troops of the 47th Army breached the German defences, the Soviet 18th Army, also from North Caucasus front, was to land its forces in or immediate vicinity of the city itself, on the Semes Bay. With the German occupation of Sevastopol and Novorossiysk in 1942, the Soviet Black Fleet had lost its primary naval bases. Its operations were shifted further down the southeast coast to the city of Poti. Therefore, the recapture of Novorossiysk would provide the Soviet Black Sea Fleet with a base large enough to accommodate its naval forces. The Soviet 47th Army launched its attacks northeast of the city on February the 1st, 1943. The spearhead was unable to breach the German defence lines and reach its objectives. To support the 47th, Petrov ordered the 18th Army to land its forces from the sea no later than February the 4th. This amphibious assault was to be carried out in two locations. The main landing force was to come ashore in the vicinity of a village south Ozereyka. This force was composed of the 255th Naval Infantry Brigade and the 563rd Separate Tank Battalion and supporting assets. A diversionary landing was to take place on Cape Hako on the western side of Semes Bay, near Stanichka village, which was situated in the vicinity of Novorossiysk. The 250 men in this battalion task force came from the 255th Naval Infantry Brigade. The Black Sea Fleet under Vice Admiral F.S. Oktyabrski was to transport the troops and provide covering bombardment. Oktyabrski was in the overall command of the complete operation. The armoured fist of the primary assault, the 563rd Separate Tank Battalion, was formed in the summer of 1942. Initially, the battalion was equipped with British Valentine and American Stuart Lend-Lease tanks, but eventually became entirely equipped with the M3A3 Stuarts. The lack of appropriate landing craft was to play a key and tragic role in the operation. Instead of actual amphibious assault craft, the Soviets were forced to use Belindas, which were shallow draft self-propelled barges. These craft were named for a Swedish firm that had produced maritime commercial vessels in Russia before 1917 revolution. The plan called for 30 tanks to land in the first echelon at South Ozereyka. After disembarking the tanks, the Belindas were to revert to their role as a floating docks and receive troops disembarking from gunboats, trawlers and transports, which could not get close to the beach due to their deeper draft. Embarkation began on the evening of February the 3rd in Gelendzhik, which was ill-equipped to handle an operation of this size. At 3:35 a.m. on February the 4th, 6 cutters packed with 300 naval infantrymen darted towards the Axis-occupied shore. The defences came alive. The bulk of the defenders on this stretch of the shoreline were from the Romanian 10th Infantry Division. The Germans were represented in small but effective numbers of specialist troops, mainly field and anti-aircraft and artillery batteries, and searchlight crews. Well-manned searchlights reached out and found the advancing Soviet craft, and it immediately came under heavy artillery and mortar and machine gun fire. 2 cutters were hit right away, and one of them, the SK-051, exploded. The resulting losses cut the assault force by a third, with only 200 men out of 300 men actually landing. The loss of SK-051 was doubly significant because of the commander of the spearhead force, Captain 3rd rank Lieutenant Commander A.P. Ivanov, was killed, leaving the troops without effective command and control. Since Ivanov was dead, there was no one to give the Belindas the signal to advance closer to the shore. Roughly half an hour to an hour after the landing began, the surviving naval infantrymen still were not able to suppress the German and Romanian fire. Their foothold on the beach was very tenuous. It is unknown who gave Belindas the command to move in, but they began to creep forward. These vulnerable landing craft, loaded with tanks, represented a gunner's dream. Slow, fat targets. The German searchlights easily spotted the approaching Belindas. Immediately, the Belindas came under fire. The very first hits on Belinda No. 2 and its tugboats, Gelendzhik, caused serious damage and set the vessels on fire. Still over 200 metres away from the shore, both vessels began to sink. The 350 men on board, naval infantrymen and tank and vessel crews, were forced to jump into the freezing water and swim ashore under fire. All 10 tanks on board, a third of the total of the armed force, were lost. The German searchlights, overhead flares and fires aboard the burning ships illuminated ample targets for the defenders, but the appearance of Soviet tanks on shore demoralised the Romanian soldiers. Armed only with light infantry weapons, the men, led by Major Caesar L. Kunov, were all volunteers from the 255th Naval Infantry Brigade. Caesar Kunov was an experienced and capable officer, distinguished in prior actions on the Azov and Black Seas during 1941 and 1942. His men held him in highest esteem. Legend has it that Kunov called for volunteers for his task force. He announced, "Who wants to go die with me?" More men than needed stepped forward. Kunikov's depleted force was pulled back to the water and tasked with organising operations on the makeshift wharf. meeting and directing arriving reinforcements, weapons and supplies, as well as evacuating wounded. On the night of February the 12th, 1943, Major Kunov stepped on one of the German mines that had still littered the beachhead and was seriously wounded in the groin. Had qualified medical help been readily available, he might have been saved. By the time he was evacuated 2 days later, gangrene had set in. Kunikov died on February the 14th, shortly after arriving at the Gelendzhik hospital. He was posthumously made a hero of the Soviet Union, the highest Soviet military recognition. Now, it's time to show you this fascinating diorama that literally has a place in time in history. The work on this particular diorama is second to none. It's just stunning. Well, I'm sure you've been listening to me long enough, so I'm going to put on some music for you to enjoy the rest of this diorama. I hope you've enjoyed this stunning video and can appreciate the amount of work and effort that has gone into this diorama from the skilled hands of Ivan Kruznik. If you have enjoyed this video and you want to see more, then please press the like button, subscribe, and I will try and get many more out there. And don't forget to tell your friends. I'm AD Roberts from In War and Peace, and all it leaves me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay safe, much magic, and of course, happy modelling. And I'll see you guys in the next one.